Hello, everybody. So, this week's lecture, what I want to talk about is traditional and contemporary leadership in Native America, because what I want you to kind of understand before we get into the next section, last few weeks of class here, is I would like to give you a snapshot of what it is that Native Americans are sort of structured, or how they're structured within their leadership, within their communities. One of the key factors I think we need to really look at and really understand in this is that when Native American tribes approach state governments or federal governments, we are not approaching them as a group of people, a protesting group, or a group that's trying to advocate for something in particular as like a nonprofit or whatever. We're actually representing ourselves as a government. So there's a very distinct difference, is that we are a government. We have an inherent government right to approach other governments, i.e., the main state government in this state. And that's what we're going to be looking at. Really, is how leadership plays out within the tribes on a blanket level. It's different on every particular reservation or nation or territory. It's very different, but overall we're going to be looking at it like this, and we're going to again bring it back to Maine, use Maine as the example, because again, being myself growing up on a small island, which was the Penobscot Nation community, still is, I have a different perspective as far as what it looks like inside. So I want to kind of look at that a little bit. I'm going to kind of explain this a little bit, and this is going to lead us up into what we're going to be talking about next week, which is how Native Americans are portrayed in film. And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit as we go next week. So here where we go on this. So I want to look at traditional leadership. And when I talk about traditional leadership in Native communities, what I really am talking about is that leadership, which is a government, what we would consider a government today. So in other words, you have a chief, a council, and advisors to that council as well. Just because that group meets doesn't give them the authority to make decisions for the community on a level that the community doesn't have a say in, because they do have a say in it. The community is very much a part of this process, and decisions don't have to be made immediately, and decisions are consensus by majority. So in other words, you don't have any dissent. You have a verbalized dissent, but you don't have any dissent against the entire process as far as the outcome goes. So when there's an outcome within a decision within the government, then what happens is you just walk out of that meeting saying, okay, that's good, I can live with that. I don't like it, but I can live with it, and I'm going to have to live with it. So you don't fight against that particular decision that's made. You recognize that decision as a decision the community's made, a majority of the community's made, and it's usually 70, 80, sometimes 90%. So just keep in mind that when we talk about consensus, it's not a majority consensus or a complete 100% consensus. It's a majority consensus. So that we're going to look at it a little bit different, how we use the word consensus, because it's not a word from our language, but we didn't necessarily talk things out until everybody agreed on it. We basically had to make decisions at some point. Otherwise, we'd be like the U.S. government, and we'd be going nowhere. It's kind of static, kind of hanging there. So let's look at contemporary leadership. Contemporary leadership is that in which has been documented in writing. So we're talking about contact, European contact, as documented. Now we know there was European contact with tribes in the United States, what we call the United States now, in Canada, for a couple hundred years, but that was never recorded. That was never written down. It was just interactions. It wasn't because people didn't necessarily want to document those. It just was that wasn't the context. So we're going to talk about contemporary leadership as that which is written. So we're talking about the late 1400s, early 1500s in the area that we now call Maine, and we had different explorers sort of come on behalf of the crown, looking for natural resources that they could take back and sell, and that was Spanish, the Portuguese, the French, and the English, in that order. And that contemporary leadership was well documented. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I think we need to be on the same page as far as what I refer to as traditional leadership and what we refer to as contemporary leadership. So let's look at that. So obviously I'm going to be focusing on the Wabanaki, which is the tribes that are in this area, Wabanaki, the Confederation, and we're going to be looking at sovereignty. Now, sovereignty is an issue. I think that when you really look at it, when you really try to understand it, a lot of people that are for sovereignty really don't know what it's about. What does it mean? We're a sovereign nation. The United States is a sovereign nation. It's an autonomous state. It's a supreme power over itself. Tribes want to be sovereign. Tribes really talk a lot about we're a sovereign nation. We're looking for our sovereignty. I want you to recognize our sovereignty. But being an autonomous state, autonomous state, does not necessarily mean that you can, within your boundaries exist. So you have to take some kind of step outside your boundaries, economically, socially, politically, whatever it may be. But here's the bottom line: supreme power over yourself. So if you have supreme power over yourself, you have the ability to make economic decisions, who you're going to trade with, who you're going to buy things from, where your stuff can go, who you can sell to. Those are the kind of things that we're looking at. We're really looking at, you have power over yourself. You run your own government. You have your own court. You have your own laws. And this is something that the state of Maine and the federal government at times have a lot of sort of disapproval or misunderstanding over, because the United States, being a sovereign nation, has supreme power over itself, and because of laws that the United States and the state of Maine have made within its boundaries, they've basically superseded the laws of sovereignty of tribes. So supreme power over yourself. You actually create laws for your people. You actually create laws that work for you. And this is what it is. So get on that page a little bit. So here we have a traditional government. And this is sort of something that happens within tribes in the Northeast. Again, I added other things that other circles of chiefs that exist as well, but again, I'm focusing on the Northeast. So we can look at the Iroquois to the west of the Wabanaki, the closest Iroquois tribe being 900 miles, not 900 miles, 9 hours west of us here in Maine, and that's the Seneca Nation in New York. And what we have here in the council forums is the structure of Maine Indians, and also the same structure within Iroquois. And at some point we might talk about the relationship of the Iroquois and the Wabanaki confederations of tribes, but for now we're just going to look at just the actual traditional forms of government. So we have a head chief. The head chief is a chief that's not necessarily hereditary, because that's never the way it was either for Iroquois or for Wabanaki, but it's somebody who's chosen, and it's somebody who's chosen because they have empathy for their people. They have the ability to think beyond themselves. They have the ability to look in the future and see what's best. Now, this head chief could have been chosen because the other head chief had either left his position because of stress or age or death, whatever it was. It was just something that had to happen, and they had to leave. And they could have been a war chief or a peace chief or even a clan chief. Now, women at the time couldn't be chiefs, and a lot of times women will ask, when I'm teaching this class live, they'll ask, well, you are a democracy as far as your tribe goes, so how is it that a democracy can't have a woman leader as far as a chief goes? Well, my answer to that would be because it's the same reason why I could never be a clan mother. It's that simple. A clan mother is a female. A head chief is a male, and that's why the clan mothers have a right at any point in time to revoke the head chief from his position, to recall him. Now, we look at the United States as being a democracy. The United States likes to tout itself as a democracy. But are you really a democracy if women can't vote? And the answer to that question is absolutely not. A democracy is where everybody is equal, everybody has an equal say, everybody has a chance to be at whatever socioeconomic level that they can, aspire to. The United States has been around for a while as a country, and always touted itself again as a democracy, but for the first few hundred years of that democracy, women couldn't vote, men who didn't own land couldn't vote, blacks couldn't vote, Native Americans were not even considered citizens of the country. Those are the kinds of things that a democracy does not have. Democracy does not exist if you don't have complete voice within all your citizenry. In 20s, 23, something like that. This is not U.S. history, but it was around that area where women actually could vote in the United States. So it was, let's say 1923, I think it was. And if it was at 1923, then, we haven't even been a democracy for 100 years yet because women couldn't vote. So how do we look at these democracies? How do we look at these sort of structures of leadership? It's pretty interesting. And in this respect, in this traditional forum, yes, we were a true democracy because women had say. Women had the ultimate say. Women choose their clan chiefs, their family chiefs. Women choose their lead hunters, who is essentially a chief. Women choose the peace chief. They choose the war chief, and ultimately choose the head chief. And in any of those chief positions, the women have power of recall. That needs to be understood. So even though a woman couldn't hold a chief position, they had the power to remove any chief who was doing anything that was detrimental or self-serving to the tribe, or themselves or their families. So the power recall is an ultimate power. And so we had the head chief. We had the war chief, who obviously was in charge of leading our people into battles, leading our people into times that were not very, not very nice, bloody battles or skirmishes, maybe. We had a peace chief who was different than the war chief. We didn't have our war chiefs talk peace. Our war chiefs were in there and trained to do one thing, and that was carry out war. Now, today, we have generals in our country and in many countries who act as both. They try to negotiate peace first, but if not, they carry their people into war. Well, our war chief and our peace chief are two separate people, because the peace chief chooses never to pick up a weapon. They make that choice ceremoniously, that they pick up anything other than a weapon. And what we say is that they pick up the feather. They pick up the spiritual aspect of who we are. So they have the peace chief. Lead hunter, that's pretty obvious, takes our people out in certain villages, knows the land, organizes hunts. That's very important, because in a community where you live in the forest, in a community where there are other villages and people in the forest, you don't want to have a bunch of people out just spontaneously scattered hunting, because that could lead to the death of some innocent person. We didn't have camouflage back in those days. I mean, we did. We had camouflage. We had camouflage very well. We didn't have fluorescent orange, is what I meant to say. And the fluorescent orange stuff, tells us that's a human, opposed to that's an animal. But yet, For some reason today we still shoot people who are wearing fluorescent orange, and we say we thought they were a turkey or something like that. But needless to say, we don't want to have that kind of confusion. So what we do is we have hunters that arrange hunting parties. So you're not just having people going out hunting all the time, day, night, different places. It's actually organized. That's what the lead hunter does. Clan mother is a woman who is probably, generally speaking, the oldest female in a family, and not just an immediate family, an extended family, that's chosen by that extended family and the immediate family to represent the family. Now, it doesn't give her ultimate power. It doesn't give her really any power other than to help other clan mothers appoint chiefs, monitor chiefs, and arrange for different events like naming ceremonies for babies or midwifery. They were very important. They were instrumental. Without them, we wouldn't be here today. And they're probably the most important person. And this particular circle of chiefs is obviously linear, but there's no particular order to the chiefs here. It's a circle. And when you look at the circle, it's never ending, and everybody has the same kind of voice. But the only person that again has the ability to recall are the clan mothers. Now we have in the Wabanakis 23 clans, 23 families. Not every one of them in every village. We probably have about 8 to 12 in every village, different clans. And so we have about that many clan mothers representing the council circles within those tribes. And this again is traditional form of government. Last thing we had was a clan chief. Now the clan chief was the male. The clan chief actually represented the family, an extended family, chosen by the clan mothers and the family, male and female, talked out, chosen because of their leadership, and they represent their family as far as the male side. So when a clan chief is out hunting, he's still a clan chief. So the lead hunter might say, I'm going to put you in charge of this group of hunters. Or he might be sitting next to the peace chief when the peace chief is trying to negotiate peace, or the war chief when they're carrying out war, or the head chief when there are decisions that need to be made, or they're representing the community in another government community next door, 2 doors, 3 doors down, whatever it may be. So the clan chiefs had a role as well. And again, this struck a balance, and it helped to aid decision making. They also had some roles that they had to play. They had to have 4 points of knowledge, and that was a leadership role, obviously. That was that they had to have values. The values had to be community values, family values, traditional values, spiritual values. Those values had to be consistent across the board. They had power that was derived from the people, so the people could, they basically sat in this circle of chiefs at the leisure of the people. The people basically chose them, kept them there, but obviously you have to have leadership. So that was power derived from the people. Tribal membership is key function of tribal government. In other words, tribal governments in those times when you had circle of chiefs, you could adopt another tribal member from, let's say, if you're a Penobscot, you could adopt a Mohawk tribal member, or an Onondaga, or a Narragansett, or a Pequot, or whatever. You could adopt them into the tribe. Tribal government had the say on that, and they would stand. This person who was going to be adopted would stand in front of the tribal council, stand in front of people who are sitting in the wings of the tribal halls, and state their case, and people could speak out against it. And if they did speak out against it, they better have a really good reason that this person should not be a member. So tribal membership wasn't necessarily that we were separate, but we were inclusive. And that was a key function within tribal government. Also, if somebody wanted to leave the tribe, tribal government had to grant them blessing to leave the tribe, so they wouldn't be sort of part of that community again. And again, that gets into a lot of different microcosms that we really can't get into, as far as what does it mean to be a tribal member, what does it mean to be not a tribal member, those kinds of things. And in the traditional sense, today it has a lot of different meaning. So taking the sovereign nation approach a little bit more, looking at it as far as how it plays into tribal governments, we can see that tribal sovereignty is not a new concept. Absolutely not a true new concept. It is a concept that's ancient. It goes back to beginning a time when people actually started putting together leadership within communities, whether they were nomadic communities or semi-nomadic communities. You had to have the ability to govern yourselves. You had to have supreme authority over yourself, and that was very important. So sovereignty within the tribes, very, 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 very old concept, and that it's inherent. That means you don't have to ask permission to be sovereign. You don't have to look at another government or another tribe to recognize you as a sovereign nation or sovereign tribe. You don't have to look at that. You have it. It's inherent. It's just it's there. It's that simple. Tribes are nations within a nation. So if you look at tribes within the United States and Canada, they're really tribal nations, okay, and they refer to themselves mostly as tribal nations. Like you can hear, like the Penobscot Nation, the Maliseet Nation, the Micmac Nation, the Passamaquoddy Nation. We consider ourselves nations because we're sovereign. We have that inherent right. So we have the right to govern ourselves. We have supreme authority over ourselves. So we're nations surrounded by the United States. We don't need passports, obviously, to kind of get off our nation and onto another nation, or vice versa. This is something that is takes place like any person moving from town to town. But we're nations within nation. Tribal examples of diplomacy and an active voice in government. So sovereignty basically looks at how the tribes present themselves diplomatically, and how the tribes have an active voice in their local state governments. That is really important. That is key, that we know that. And again, it's something that a lot of the tribes don't look for permission to do. It's something that the tribes have inherently, and that's the way they look at it. And so that's an interesting way of sort of representing yourself. And special Wabanaki example of sovereignty and diplomacy, basically, the reason I put that in there is that the Wabanaki in itself is a confederation of tribes, 4 tribes, and the tribes have supreme authority over themselves within tribes. We all speak the same language within those tribes and outside those tribes, but again, we're put together. And the example that I've heard used is that you could take one arrow, and you could put it in your hands, and you can snap it. But if you put 4 arrows together and try to snap them, it's harder to snap. So together, the confederation is a stronger force within government, and it's a diplomacy, a sovereignty. We deal with border issues. We deal with water rights, water rights that just benefit us, but water rights that benefit everybody. And we're not just looking at protecting ourselves. We're looking at protecting the water. We're looking at protecting the border, and that has implications for everybody, especially if it's water. Because if we're trying to get clean water, Winona LaDuke, a friend of mine who is Anishinaabe, basically from the Great Lakes area, she once said that, why is it that when people try to destroy the water, if they're big companies, they basically are poisoning the water with chemicals or whatnot, because they're using the water for some kind of mining operation or something like that. Why are those companies just economic ventures? But if we try to protest for clean water, we're considered activists. It's just it's ridiculous, because it's for everybody, not just us. So we don't necessarily just fight for us, we fight for the spirit of whatever it is, and it has a benefit or a detriment to every living human and animal that is along those waterways. So I'm going to look at, I think I talked about this, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing back between slides here. So how did this happen? Well, we have relevant history, facts, or strategies. Any of them that are relevant. Any relevant history, fact, or strategy plays into this. Plays into sovereignty, plays into leadership, plays into tribal governments. Whatever it may be. And again, now we're talking history. So in this era, we're talking about written stuff. Written facts, written history, written strategies. So not just documented by the defeated or the conqueror, but by both. Original assumptions that are no longer valid sometimes play into how this happened again, as far as how it was looked at, how it was perceived, how it was built up. And the Wabanaki are considered to have really no real say in I love my phone ringing right now, but have no real say in how assumptions make things no longer valid. We have no say in that. It's just, it's assumptions. Assumptions are something that are pressed upon you. So that's just really interesting in that respect. I just want to throw that in. So, importance of traditional leadership. Well, what the importance of traditional leadership is that there are problems were discussed and solved using the consensus. We talked about that earlier. Consensus was a majority, not unanimous. Head chief managed the meetings, so they were like the just making sure people were on task, making sure people got a chance to talk, making sure things were going to happen. And this was not in a way that was time driven. We didn't have to be out by 9 o'clock or something like that. It had to, it went until people just decided it was enough. And clan mothers make the final decision, and those decisions are approved by the rest of the council circle. So again, the clan mothers with power of recall have the final decision. When decisions are made, they look at the clan mothers, and the clan mothers either nod their head or say no. If they nod their head and say yes, then the rest of the council votes on it. If they say no, it needs to be discussed further, then it's discussed further. So we have two different kinds of ways of looking at it as far as the Wabanaki and the Iroquois way of maternalism. Now, matrilineal is essentially just your family tree, the women's side of your family tree. So the mother's family. If you're looking at your matrilineal side, you're looking at your mother's family, their mother's family, their mother's family. So matriarchal is a little bit different, and that's what we're talking about here. Matriarchal is more of the way in which the women have an effect in the society as the head of the family. And we use a lot of times today, most of the time, almost all the time, I guess, in the United States, we use our father's name. We hold on to that name. But in our way, it's the mother's name. It's the mother's clan. That's what we hold on to. So it refers to an attitude that exalts women's capacities to mother and extends to society as a whole the values of care, nurturance, and morality. So care, nurturance, and morality of entire community, not just their family. Of course, their family, their children, their grandchildren, of course. But it extends to society as a whole. That's the clan mother's role. And this is very, very, very important in trying to understand us. It's built within our stories, it's built within our language, that this is what it is. This is who we are. Now, there is some documentation in this area that talks about leadership and government, sovereignty, clan mothers. One of them is the Seven Fires Prophecy. And if you've taken my Native American Studies 102 class, Intro to Wabanaki Studies, we talk about this in an entire class, and that this is set up as a transition for invasion of the contemporary. So the seven fire prophecies, basically the seven fires are different generations. We don't look at generations as like a 20-year span, which the U.S. government looks at generations within the census as like 20-year spans. We don't look at it like that. A generation is somebody's birth to death. And we're talking about not a premature death, but like you lived a full life. So you could be 80. That's a generation. So we're looking at different generations here, like probably hundreds of thousands of years. Now we look at some of the events within the Seven Fires prophecy. We look at land formations and things like that. We can see that these prophecies started about 2,000, 3,000 years ago. And each fire is a person who came forward and talked about a certain event that was going to take place. And then a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations later, another prophet would come. If you're interested in looking at the Seven Fires prophecies, you can just Google it. It's published, and it talks about the Eastern Indians, the Algonquin Eastern Indians, not the Iroquois, but the Eastern Algonquin, meeting people who eventually were going to take over our land, and how we should handle that, and how it's not going to be something that we necessarily agree with, but this is what we need to do to maintain our level of stories, our language. And it worked, because here we are over 500 years later, still speaking our language, still singing our songs, still here as a people. So we didn't become, we obviously are part of society. We're part of contemporary people. We are contemporary people, but we have the ability to know who we are from thousands of years ago, just based on the roles we had to play under those prophecies. And the second one is the wampum records, and we talked about wampum. We talked about what it means, and this was to set up a record of traditional laws as written on the wampum belts. So again, it's just a little summary here. Wampum meaning the talk. It's a pre-English alphabet way of sending important messages from one nation to another, but these were not just scribble messages. These were messages that were consistent and would be delivered time and time again, basically kicking off meetings or kicking off like midwinter ceremonies or things like that. It was just a message that was delivered to say, this is going to happen. So contemporary leader structures. Here we are going into the contemporary realm here, and this is basically something that's U.S. government imposed. First of all, we still have a chief, and that's our elected head of the tribe. And so this particular chief now could be a male or female. They just need to be elected. We've not had a female chief in the Penobscot tribe. The Maliseets have had a female chief for 20 years. The Micmacs have had male and female chiefs in Maine. The Passamaquoddies, both tribes in Indian Township and the tribe in Pleasant Point, have both had just male chiefs. So a little different today. They're elected, just like any election. We have a sub-chief. It's a ceremonial position. It's not necessarily a paid position, but it's just basically put in there. Something happened to the chief, sub-chief would take over just until a special election could be held or whatever needed to take place. The sub-chief was also a tiebreaker in a split council decision. So if we look at our council, there are 12 elected tribal members, and that's an even number. So you could literally have a split of 6 and 6, and there's no decision made there. But the sub-chief has the ability to break that tie. So if the sub-chief is not available or is out of town, then the chief would make that decision in the tie. The chief normally would not make that decision. So sub-chief is really a ceremonial position. It's like a 13th council member in a respect of breaking a tie, and has a voice. has ability to serve until a special election if the chief is somehow incapacitated. And they all serve 2-year terms. Now, the changes in leadership in this area began, well, not just in this area, but all over the United States, sometimes later, but in this area because we were more suppressed by the governments. Now, 1850s, the changes began here. We know that Maine became a state in 1820 under the Missouri Compromise. We basically were let go by Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to become our own state. We were to become a free state. And this is in 1820 again. Missouri would come in as a state, but they would come in as the last slave state into the Union. Again, 1820, Missouri Compromise, Maine becomes a state. And 30 years later, we start to see the state of Maine government imposing their value system, their government systems on us. They also did it with, not the state of Maine, but other states did it with their tribes as well around the same time. And it was the imposition of European-style governments on the tribes. In other words, they said you're not going to have chiefs or sachems. You're going to have governors. So each tribe would have a governor or a chair of the tribe instead of a chief. And you're going to have councils. You're not going to have this traditional stuff going on anymore. And the effects of losing traditional leadership roles really played a big part in how tribes slowly over time became weaker and weaker in their governments. Although we became weaker and weaker in our governments as far as our traditional governments go to a contemporary government, we didn't necessarily change the way we thought or think, in that we are sovereign nations or that we need to be ruled by a higher power, because we're not just a group of people, we're a government. Again, keep that in mind. And transition to leaders of today basically led into council members and school board members and chief, and that was it. The elected positions on our tribe are a tribal representative that represents the tribe at the state level but doesn't have a vote at the state level, but they are recognized as a tribal representative by the state of Maine. But again, no vote in the final process. We vote them in every 2 years. We vote a chief in every 2 years. We vote a council in every 2 years, 6 1 year, 6 the next, so that the whole council doesn't change. It's just half potentially can change each time there's an election. School board, they're the other ones that are elected, and that's it. That's all we have in our tribes that are elected. Just like any town, pretty much, or any region. So today, when we look at it, here's an outline: tribal governments. We have our tribal leader, chief or governor. Most of our chiefs in the state of Maine are called chiefs. The only one that uses governor is Indian Township Passamaquoddy leader, still refers to themselves in the council, and the people there refer to them as governors. But the Passamaquoddy, Pleasant Point, and the Holton Band of Maliseets, the Aroostook Band of Micmacs, and the Penobscot tribe all refer to our leaders as a chief. We have a tribal council. We have tribal laws that are enacted within our boundaries. We have tribal agencies, so we have like the Department of Natural Resources. We have the Department of we have a forestry department. We have, well, that's under natural resources. We have school board. We have police department. We have fire department. We have school with a school board. We have, I talk about that down below here, but we have tribal agencies. We have tribal courts. Okay, so the Passamaquoddies have a court. The Maliseets have a court. The Micmac don't. The Penobscot have a court as well. And we have tribal bylaws. Now, that's not necessarily as great as a constitution, but bylaws within the tribe are considered to be like a minor part of a constitution. So a constitution is something that sovereign nations have. Now, the tribe has been working on a constitution for years, the Penobscot tribe, but it seems to go nowhere when it comes right down to voting on it by the people, because what is a constitution? Well, a constitution is something that represents the United States government anyway. We're just falling under their sort of terminology, and is our Constitution going to be recognized by them anyway? You know, it's not like we really care in the fact that we're a tribal government, but it's the fact that, does it make a difference? Should we put an effort into something that's not going to make a difference? So the differences between the tribes is that some tribes have state representatives. State of Maine is the only tribe in the 50 states that has state representatives. Again, non-voting members, but they have a seat in the House of Representatives. They can sit on committee. They can speak out in committee. They can vote in committee, but they can't vote in the end. That's a difference. Some of the tribes have tribal schools, some don't. The Micmacs and Maliseets don't have tribal schools, but the two Passamaquoddy villages and the Penobscot village do. Tribal schools go from early childhood right up to the 8th grade. After 8th grade, they have to go to public high schools, or private high schools, depends on where they decide to go. But the thing is that some tribes have them, some tribes don't. We have the Child Welfare Act, which is called the Indian Child Welfare Act, which basically protects children of Native parents. So if there's a non-Native parent and a Native parent, there's different kinds of laws in which tribes and courts and families can go through and actually have to go through. Courts have to consider certain things, and that's a national law. We have hunting and fishing, and again, if you have a land base, you have to monitor your land. We monitor our own land. We don't have state game wardens come in on our land. They're not allowed. It's hunting and fishing monitored by our game wardens on our own land. And we have internal tribal matters, which is freedom of access. So the state and the federal government cannot get involved when a tribe declares that they're having an internal tribal matter. That is off the hands of the state and the federal government. They can't interfere. And again, it has to pertain to a tribal matter. So in other words, it's something that happens with a tribal member, or it's something that happens with a non-tribal member on tribal lands, usually in that respect a job. So we have a non-tribal member who is working for the community, a tribal community, and they get fired or they get let go, whatever you want to call it, and they attempt to sue the tribe because they don't feel like they should have been fired or let go. The tribe can just say, we're having a hearing in here and you can't sue us because it's an internal tribal matter, and the state and federal government recognize that. And if you're ever to work for a tribe, you would be made completely aware that your job exists at the pleasure of the tribe, and that sometimes they'll say if there's a tribal member that does qualify, that meets or exceeds your qualifications at some point, we'll give you a notice so that you can find another job, and we'll give you a good recommendation, but the tribal member is going to get that job. That happens so infrequently, but at the same time, it's understood, and people generally don't fight it. But those who do fight it tend to lose because the court case, because it's an internal tribal matter. So we have gone through this presentation, and looking at this presentation again, I think one of the real key things I want you to think about is I want you basically to differentiate, to understand that there is a difference between Native people and governments. As far as so let me rephrase that. Native people are tribal governments. So when a tribe and a tribal leaders get up and they start talking, they're not just a group that's protesting or an activism group or whatever it is, that an activist group that's coming in to complain. They're there as a government. So you need to understand that there's a different relationship there, and that's not how a lot of people understand it. A lot of citizens in the United States just understand us as another group, and we're not. So that's the key, and I appreciate your listening to this week, and I'll be talking to you next week. Keep your eye on Blackboard because your assignment will be up. Your assignments will be due on Fridays now, so you'll have plenty of time to get them done. Try again. I put up that you have 2 tries to enter your paper or your responses. I'll be putting up a little bit more so that you can you can try if you mess up a couple times. Thing I want you to understand though is that Blackboard has a support for students, and you should use them if you can't seem to get your papers up. But we'll talk about that. But check out Main Street. I'm Blackboard. I'm sorry, so that you can catch up on the assignment and go from there. So take it easy. I'll talk to you later. Have a good week.